Hello everyone, good morning, good afternoon, wherever you are. Thank you again so much for joining us today for this latest edition of the ALNAP Urban Webinar Series, focusing on engaging local government in urban humanitarian response. Thanks to everyone joining us. So we will be having Andras from Mercy Corps Lebanon with his presentation about their work engaging urban municipal governments in Lebanon. And we'll also continue the conversations which emerged today in the Urban Response Community of Practice. So please do join us there and share your thoughts with the community. So as I said, our presenter today is Andras, who is the project manager for Mercy Corps' governance and conflict management work in Lebanon. He'll be presenting today on Mercy Corps' work to bring together local government and the Lebanese and Syrian communities to empower and train people and create mechanisms to manage tensions and mitigate violence. Andras has spent the previous 4 years living in or working in the Arab world with local organizations on youth and peace building in Lebanon, community arbitration, and the integration of marginalized groups in Egypt, and then regionally at Mercy Corps' European headquarters, focusing on expanding conflict management programming. Previously, Andras also spent brief periods in Serbia and Kosovo working on inter-community relations and the inclusion of marginalized groups in local government decision-making, and in Colombia on the disarmament, demobilizations, and reintegration of former combatants. So we're very pleased to have Andras here with us today. And so welcome, Andras.
Thank you very much for the introduction, and thank you very much all for joining me today. So I am going to be talking about Mercy Corps' work with the government and with Lebanese and Syrian communities in Lebanon. Now my presentation today is going to have 5 parts. First, I'll quickly discuss where this program came from and the history of Mercy Corps' engagement with the Lebanese government. Then I'll talk about the theory and the objectives of the program so you can understand the approach and where we're coming from. And then I'm going to briefly talk about program's components, and then finally about the lessons learned. These 2 documents are something that we created in last year, in 2013-2014, we had a program funded by the British Embassy that surveyed 12 municipalities across Lebanon, north, south, and in the east. And it really tried to understand what their needs were and what the best practices that some of them were implementing. So what are the mechanisms and tools that municipalities were using in managing the impact of the Syrian refugee crisis that we could really take and expand out. And the program that I'm going to discuss with you now is very much comes from the lessons that we learned through doing this research. I find this piece of research on the internet if you just type in Mercy Corps Lebanon and municipalities, and these are the 2 documents I'm looking for. So the theories behind the program are one around government responsiveness and the other one about community-based tensions and conflict management mechanisms. So the first one about the community-based conflict management mechanism is very much about creating links between people and their community leaders. And we're going to discuss the selection of the community leaders and how we ensure that they are responsive to the needs of the local population later. And what we very much want to do is empower these leaders to represent the needs of their communities, and that make community members feel like their needs are considered, and if their needs are considered, then they are less likely to use violence as a means to get what they want. And then the governance component is on a similar train of thought. It's about ensuring that local government considers the needs of the local population, and that if there is this link between the average person and the decision-making processes of local government, then people are less likely to use violence to get what they want. So essentially this program is about ensuring that there isn't zero-sum competition over resources in the pocket areas. And because this program is about resource-based tensions and mitigating these, we very much had to select municipalities to work in where we could maximize this program impact. So we selected 2 locations where we could best work on resource-based tensions. And this meant that the tensions in the area had to be about economics and not political, that they had to be between Lebanese and Syrian and not involving Palestinians, because the dynamics between the Lebanese-Palestinian relationship is very different, and it's got more politics and historical issues around it. And then lastly, we had to work in an urban environment, because part of this program is working on municipal infrastructure, and Lebanon is a very mountainous area. So, if you have a municipality might have one part of it on one hilltop and the other part of it on another hilltop, and you could work on the water mains and the municipal water distribution, and it wouldn't actually reach everyone in the area. So we had to look for places where people were quite closely knit together. And we chose 2 locations. One is Midyata, and you'll see some brief information there. It's got 46% refugees, and when I say that the municipality is Sunni March 14, that means that it's on the side of the Syrian rebels in the Syrian civil war. And this means that the refugees who go there are primarily Syrian Sunnis, who might be either rightly or wrongly associated with the Syrian rebels. And it also means that they feel quite welcome there. And because of that, in stark contrast to the other location, which I'll mention in a moment, because they feel quite welcome, they're much more present and physically active, and much more likely to get in fights if they don't like something. Whereas at the other location is Hermel, where there are a much higher number of Lebanese. This is, Hermel is a big city, whereas Midyata is a small town. But Hermel is in staunch Hezbollah territory, which is on the side of the Syrian regime. And that means that the Syrians there very much keep their heads down and keep to themselves much more. And just some brief about Lebanon, so within that whole space there's 4.5 million people, and now with the refugees totaling about 1.3, 1.4 million, the country has about 35-36% refugees. And this is the highest per capita ratio of any country in the world, which is especially stark because Lebanon is a very small country. It will take you about 4 hours to drive from north to south along the coastal road, and about 2.5 hours to drive from east to west. So next I'm going to go over the components of the program, and this is an infographic that our communications people made, which details the 6 components of the program. So for the next 10 minutes or so, I'll go through each of these so you can all properly understand what it is that. So first is selecting the community leaders. This was quite a sensitive part because we use a method that's part democratic and then part Mercy Corps retaining control. So what we do is we go to the local community and we tell them that you can nominate local leaders. And you have to nominate these leaders based on a number of different criteria. You have to answer questions about how they represent the community, what kind of issues do you go to them to ask them to negotiate, what is their role within the community. And then once we have a list of these people that were nominated, we interview them and we select which ones we would like in the program. And we have this selection because we feel that if we just have the local leaders elected directly from the people, then you're very much going to have men over the age of 40 or 50. You're not going to have youth included, you're not going to have women included. And we thought that for a program like this, it's absolutely essential to ensure that both are involved in the process. So we have 50% women as part of the community leaders. We've got illiterate men who are 70 years old. We have students in their 20s, and you wouldn't get this broad cross-section if you just allowed the community to elect their leaders directly. So the next component, once we've elected these leaders, is we train them on negotiation, mediation and non-violent communication so that they can discuss the needs of their communities in a more nuanced and non-zero-sum way. And then we encourage them to go and talk to their communities on a regular basis and ensure that they report back to us so that we know that they're doing this. And the reason for this links back to the theory of change we discussed at the beginning, that if I as a community member feel that there is a community leader who comes to me, consults me, understands my needs, and then he or she then goes and champions these needs with local decision making, then I will be less likely to use violence. If I feel like I have no such avenue to express my needs, then I'd be more likely to use violence. Once we have this done, once we have these community leaders, the Lebanese and Syrians working together, then they start designing projects. And they design projects that will best address resource-based tensions in the area. So we're primarily looking at things like municipal social services, so solid waste management, road rehabilitation. In one of the places we are working on a piece of road where there are a large number of traffic accidents because there are no speed bumps, there are no street lights, there are no street signs. And in another location we're working on a public space for children with a playground, with a small cafeteria, these sorts of things. And then in tandem with this, trying to increase the provision of municipal social services using this mechanism of the Lebanese and Syrians designing projects together, we're also working on the municipal financial and operational capacity. We do this because many of the municipalities have very weak and outdated systems and processes. So we started with an assessment of their financial and operational capacity that has 7 components. The first looks at management and administration, things like filing and archiving. The second on financial planning and management, things like revenue collection, budgeting. How do they contract and tender when they need to buy something? Is there value for money or is it corrupt? So we look at things like human resource management, local development planning, program management. Engagement with stakeholders is a key one to ensure that they do pursue public-private partnerships, that they have good relationships with regional and national government, that citizens participate in projects. And then the last of the 7 categories is governance. Things like, how do the municipal council members work with the municipality? Are they active? And how are marginalized groups included in decision making? Arising from this assessment, we then implement projects to help the municipality. So in one of the locations, we are implementing a tax mapping because the municipality is not aware of who lives in its boundaries, how much they earn, what kind of taxes they should be paying. And in the other one, we're doing a GIS, a Geographic Information System mapping, which looks at, collects information on key infrastructure and geographical issues so that the municipality can improve its planning. Everything from roads and street lighting to underground water networks. And through this component of the program, we're really trying to focus on creating systems for the municipalities and doing iterative coaching and not just trainings. And it's important that this financial and operational capacity goes hand in hand with the project implementation, because the new skills and tools that the municipality gain through this component of the program very much help them to implement the projects in the best way. So for example, the GIS mapping will really help with the rehabilitation of the water systems and irrigation networks in Hermel. There are two other components to this program where we're connecting them up to local, regional and national governments, and this is coming out of the findings of last year's programs that I mentioned at the beginning, which found that the municipalities are disconnected from the other branches of government. They're on the front lines in responding to this crisis in Lebanon because there are no refugee camps, but they have little ability to leverage the resources they need. In that last year's program, in the policy guide, there's a story that it took a municipality 3 years, 73 referrals and up to 15 signatures to hire a treasurer. And this is because they're simply not aware of the people, procedures and systems of national government and how to negotiate these. So through these meetings, we try to create these links for them. And then the last component of the program is municipality to municipality peer learning, whereby we link municipalities together so that they can share their best practice and see what they're learning from each other and what are the other tools and mechanisms that some of the municipalities are implementing that they might be able to take on to weather the crisis better. And then for the last few minutes I have left, I wanted to discuss with you some of our experiences and lessons learned and really see where the design of such programs doesn't fit well with the reality of implementing them. So the first part is about the transparency and community mobilization. Bringing together Lebanese, Syrians and the municipality in Lebanon is extremely sensitive because of Lebanon's history with the Palestinians who originally came here as refugees and are still here. The idea that the Syrians might stay on is sensitive, so creating these community-based mechanisms and linking them to local government is not something that any other organization is doing. Some organizations are linking the Lebanese to the Syrians, some organizations are strengthening the links from the municipality to the Lebanese, but nobody's bringing together all three. Now, when I designed this program, I spent a good deal of my time thinking about all the things that could go wrong when this happens, when we bring these three actors together. And in fact, none of that has materialized. And I think the reason for that is the absolute transparency with which you have to take at every step of the way. So even at the beginning, before we had identified the municipality, when we're just going to municipalities to see if those are the ones we would like to work with, we went in with a document saying exactly what the program would do. So we told them that yes, through this program, Municipal will provide you with resources to implement projects, and yes, we will work on your financial and operational capacity. However, we will also do a baseline and an end line from the program whereby we assess whether your local Lebanese citizens, how satisfied they are with your work, how satisfied they are with your provision of public services. We will also ask about the tensions between these groups. And we will also form a community-based conflict management mechanism as part of the program. And I think that this transparency really helped that nobody was taken by surprise when we started doing these quite sensitive parts of the program. And we also had the same with the Lebanese and Syrian community leaders. We have signed memorandums of understanding with all of them saying, look, if you take part in this program, yes, Municipal will train you, yes, Municipal will provide you money to play with in terms of working on municipal infrastructure programs, but we expect you to do X, Y, and Z. And this has really helped, and none of our community leaders have dropped out yet. The second experience or lesson learned is about the role of an NGO in such programming and what is the position that we can take. So ideally in a program like this, we would like to have as removed a position as possible and very much want the municipality to take the lead. Unfortunately, the municipality have had to be led quite a lot during the program. For example, when we've been doing this financial and operational capacity assessment, they have been keen to just have trainings in Microsoft Excel, training in Microsoft Word, training in proposal writing, and it took a lot of time of coaching them and discussing the possibilities that they could ask for as a result of this program to really make them realize what are all the things that they could do with this money. And the same for these regional meetings where we're connecting them to like national and regional government. A lot of the municipalities just want to ask the ministries for projects, whether it's digging wells or rehabilitating irrigation canals or building roads. And it's taken a lot of time for our staff sitting with them and trying to get them to think of how can they reform their relationship with national government, how can they create new systems and procedures for interaction and not just request money for projects which the ministry may or may not have and is probably not going to have. So going into a meeting with that approach would be counterproductive. And it's been somewhat the same with the community leaders. when we have gone to them and wanted them to start designing the bigger projects, they've requested us to build a hospital in a municipality where there's only 22,000 people, without any thought to who is going to buy the equipment for the hospital, who is going to hire the doctors and the nurses, who's going to pay for the huge running costs. So we've had to be much more active than we would have ideally have liked to be. And this goes on to the third point about neutrality and the role of international NGOs. Again, working in this space of Lebanese governance and strengthening the role from municipalities to national government is somewhat of an uncomfortable position to be in for an international NGO. But we have had to be much more active than we wanted to be. At the local government level, you have a number of key actors, the mayor of the municipality, and then you've got the president of the union of municipality, and then you have one step up, a governor type person who is in charge of a larger geographic area. And when we've wanted to convene these regional meetings, we very much wanted the municipality to do it. But if we were told that if the municipality does a regional meeting, then the president of the union won't attend. If the president of the union convenes the regional meeting, then this governor won't attend. And if the governor convenes the regional meeting, then the municipality won't attend. All just because of personal and political issues. So therefore Municipal's had to do it. Which again, it's not the role we would ideally like to take, but it's one that we've had to for the success of the program. The fourth item there, the broad scope for the community leaders. This is about giving the community leaders the freedom to see where they want to take this program. So when I designed this program, I saw a very limited role for the community leaders. We've got similar programming in Jordan and Iraq that I'm familiar with, where the community leaders really take an active, much more of an active role. But because this program in Lebanon focuses on the municipality, I wanted the role of the community leaders to be less and really push the municipality into the limelight to choose which program to implement and to oversee its implementation. But actually this has been a mistake, because the community leaders have been very keen to become much more involved in the program than I actually envisioned. So they've really taken it upon themselves to overstep the bounds that I originally envisioned for them in a good way. So we had a great success in September where the community leaders responded to an outbreak of violence in 20 minutes and mediated it. They have a WhatsApp group between them in one of the locations, and one of them saw a fight breaking out, told his fellow community leaders through the group, and they came within 20 minutes and they resolved the conflict. And I was also very much in favour of paying them for their time, thinking that we wanted to attract high caliber people who would have to take time out of their work and their professional lives to work with us. Thankfully, my technical advisors encouraged me not to go with this, so we settled on just giving them a stipend for their participation in the trainings. But even that hasn't proved necessary. These community leaders participate very willingly. They didn't, we've told them about giving them this stipend. They haven't chased us up. And in one of the areas, they're actually going to pool all of their stipends to fund a small project that the community leaders will decide on together. The last item here on the lessons learned is the disconnect between theory and practice. So the lesson that we're learning from conflict management programming in Lebanon, Jordan and Iraq is that it's positive social interaction that corresponds the strongest to improving perceptions between communities, and that actually economic interaction can often be negative or at best neutral. However, when we're implementing these projects, obviously people's finances are the most important. People need to eat, and that is their priority. So just to leave you with an open question to show this disconnect between conflict management theory and the practice of what we're doing, in Hermel, in the second location I mentioned, we're going to be rehabilitating irrigation canals. And this is going to be, I think, a great project because the farms are owned by the Lebanese, so they will increase their incomes as a result of this, and they always hire Syrians as day labourers, which will provide them with an income. Both of them will benefit financially from this program. But this is going to be an economic interaction. So, as a result of implementing this social service, which is going to be useful for both communities, are we going to be contributing to negative perceptions between the two communities? I don't think there's an answer to this question. I don't know what the right approach is. I just wanted to show it as one of the things that when you design a program like this, the theory that you have to back it up, and in practice, when you implement it, what are the things that might come out in the disconnect between the two. And that's all from me, and I think we're going to open it up to questions now. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Andres. That was a really interesting presentation, and I think both a good summation of the types of things that Mercy Corps has been doing, as well as some of the lessons learned. We're going to start off with some of the questions that some of you submitted when you were registering for the webinar. So we're going to start with those, and then we'll move on to some questions that come in live. The first question that we're going to take a look at is this question that was submitted on registration, and I think is a kind of worry that organizations might have when thinking of working with government, is about the risks of corruption or clientelism, and whether this has an impact on the degree to which humanitarians are able to engage with government, wanting to be, as Andres, as you mentioned, transparent, and fearing getting involved in kind of political aspects. So I wonder if you have any thoughts on that question, Andres.
Our level and type of engagement must be formulated to correspond to the level of corruption in the government. And in general, we just need to be aware what this level of corruption is and what level of our work will be hijacked or jeopardized or stolen as a result of corruption and clientelism. So just on a different example, inside Syria, the Syrian government and the rebels take a percentage of the aid. Normally it's around 10-12%. The NGOs and the donors accept this, they monitor it, and it makes sure it stays within acceptable limits. If it jumps up to 25%, then I think that usually what happens is the NGO and the donor have a conversation and see if it's still worth it. Because this is the price of working in unstable environments. This doesn't just go to the government, it's with everyone. So the people you hire, you have to be aware of their biases. It's of your local partners as well. And it's not necessarily bad. So in one of the locations, I've hired somebody who worked for the municipality before and is actually a family member of the mayor. And this has completely opened up all the doors to us and allowed us to have an excellent relationship with the municipality and all levels of local government. This is a clear win for the program. I think it's one of the best decisions, and all I need to do, I think, is be aware of the biases this person has and where he will naturally try to steer the program. It's not always a bad thing. And just one caveat on all of this, clientelism is present everywhere. If we think back of the UK, David Cameron, the Conservative Party, and all this Bullingdon Club friendships that they started in Oxford. I think clientelism is on a spectrum, and every human grouping from government to political parties. So yes, we have to be aware of it, but it shouldn't see it as these corrupt governments or anything on quite such a black and white scale.
Thanks very much. Another one of the questions that came in as people were registering was about knowing what level of government or what body of government to engage. And I think a related question that's just come in is, which government, which municipality, what level, which body, which municipality do you know is best to work with, and how do you make those decisions?
I think I talked about this a little bit before when I talked about the regional meeting. So as I said, as an NGO, I think we feel quite comfortable interacting with local government. The targets of our programs are usually the local population, and we will come into contact with local government around the world as a result of our work, and that's something we feel quite comfortable doing. What we feel less comfortable with is working with the national government. We don't have these links, we don't have the personalities, we don't have the durability. NGOs being funded on these like project bases. Thankfully, Merciful, we've been in Lebanon since 1993, but I think we're quite unique in that. And other organizations trying to work with national government won't have the relationships. And this is where partnerships are very important, because this is where you have to link with things like the UN. So, UNDP are usually the go-to organization for working with national governments around the world for a sustained period of time. And this is where working between NGOs and the UN can really have the most impact. Regarding the follow-up question of which municipalities, so each program is going to have its different selection criteria. As I discussed at the beginning, ours was about, because the program is designed to address resource-based tensions, we had to look for a location where we could maximize that part of the program. So we very much looked at, as I mentioned, tensions between Lebanese and Syrians, no tensions between Palestinians, urban environment, and then other things we looked at was, the municipalities that are most in need. There's no point us working in a fairly wealthy municipality where people don't need our work. So we looked at the percentage of Syrians to the Lebanese, which is why in Miryata, we said it's in, I think, 42%, and in Hermel, in the two locations we're working, it's nearly 50%.
Andres, I know you mentioned a little bit in your presentation about this kind of role of connecting national and municipal governments, and I think you articulated quite well why that's an important thing to do and what the constraints are for municipal governments who don't know about, as you said, the processes of national governments. I'm wondering if you can expand a little bit on this issue in particular, in terms of what has worked and what hasn't worked, and what advice might you give to others wanting to support connections like these based on your experience?
So that's actually the part of the program we're really focusing on now, that the mechanism whereby the Lebanese and Syrians work together is in full swing. And I think my advice here would be to partner with organizations who have a very sophisticated understanding of the government structure. So, because as I said, as an NGO, you're normally working at the local level, I don't feel that we have the best understanding of this as compared to, let's say, UNDP or other UN agencies. So the need to partner with these, I think, is very important, because you can call together meetings, you can try to facilitate these dialogues, but unless you have this higher sustained interaction with the national government, which you're really not going to have as an NGO, then your impact will decrease. And let's face it, to get these ministries to really cooperate, you have to target them at their very highest level. You have to get the ministers or the people just below them to attend and really drive your initiative forward. If you're just going to get the technical experts together, then your impact is going to be a lot less. So I think, the need for partnerships and not just trying to work on this alone as an NGO, which you normally do when it comes to, let's say, community engagement.
The next question that came in as people were registering is, how do we know whether efforts we've made to engage government have had an impact? And I'm wondering if there's anything specific to how you measure impact of engaging government compared to how you measure an impact of any part of your program, and if you have any thoughts on this question.
So this seems like quite a simple issue of monitoring and evaluation. So when you design a program, you set out your indicators. For the community-based conflict management mechanism part of the program, we have a number of Syrians who are consulted in decision making. We have the increase in Lebanese who are involved in local government participation, and then for the government part, we have similar indicators. So we have one about for the financial and operational capacity component. We've got an indicator around how technically able do governments feel to respond to the Syrian crisis? Do they feel that they have the necessary skills and knowledge and expertise to meet the needs of their Lebanese constituents and the Syrian refugees? And you do a baseline at the beginning and an end line at the end, and you want to see an increase and hopefully be the result of that. And then for this, linking municipalities to regional governments, you'd want to see an increase in the number of projects that they find funding for. If you see an increase as a result of your program, then you can attribute it to the links that you make as a result of the program. Because of course you'll always have a control group. You do a baseline and end line with a municipality that's not a beneficiary of the program, and if they don't see an increase in the number of projects that they receive funding for from the national government, but the municipality you're working with is, and then you can attribute that to your program. So I think it's just good monitoring and evaluation and good indicators.
One of the other questions that came in during registration and has also been asked live here in the webinar is the question about incentives, and I think it kind of is a two-way question. Why would local governments, want to work with us as humanitarians, and in turn, why would we want to work with local governments? What are the benefits for each actor to doing so?
So, the benefit really is the program. So, I think if you want to take even if you take the most negative view of things like this, and you assume that the only reason people are in local government is for power, then for that power they depend on the support of their local population, either implicitly or explicitly. And if you are providing assistance to that local population, then that local population is happier and they have to do less. So I think, as a very basic thing, your program provides good, which is the incentive for the local government. For my program specifically, we have the fact that we're working on their operational capacity. We're trying to link them to national government. We're going to be putting in about $120,000 of infrastructure. So there are lots of incentives for local governments. When you get into the problems is if your program would only serve one population. So at the beginning of the Syrian refugee crisis, some organizations did some quite poor programming and only provided assistance to Syrians and not the vulnerable Lebanese. I think it's quite a simple best practice that, when in any refugee setting you give support to the host community, and the second you're giving support to the host community, the local government normally see that as a good and facilitate your work.
One of our audience members was curious, Andras, to find out whether you'd implemented the project in areas that had a socioeconomic gap between the refugees and the host community, and if so, if it was any different than areas where there was less of a gap. I'm not sure if you have any thoughts on this one.
Let's do the economic gap because that's probably the easiest. So generally, if you're a poor Syrian, you're going to come to Lebanon and you're going to need to find somewhere to live. And while at the beginning of the crisis, the Lebanese were very happy and really let the Syrians come in. They shared their houses free of charge. Now most of the Syrians are renting. So if you're a poor Syrian and you haven't got much money for rent, you're going to go to a poor area and you're going to be living alongside poor Lebanese. And especially as our program tries to target the areas where the Lebanese are the most vulnerable and the municipality are the most vulnerable, really we're talking about poor Lebanese and poor Syrians living side by side. So in terms of the economic gap, there hasn't been big. The social gap has been huge. So as I discussed at the beginning, Midyata is an area where the government and the Lebanese people are more sympathetic to the Syrian rebels. So the Sunni Syrian refugees who have fled there have a lot more in common with the Lebanese, and as a result have been a lot more active, which comes in its own problems. In Hermel, in the other area, it's the direct opposite, and they're living in an area controlled by Hezbollah, which is arguably one of the strongest or at least most successful non-state actors, so they're very much keeping their heads down. And both have their positives and have their negatives. The positives of Miriata. The first one is that you can really engage with the Syrians and you really can discuss what are their needs and issues with them. The negative is that, they're much more likely to use violence as a means to get what they want. In Hermel, in the Hezbollah area, the negative is that you can't go there and talk to the Syrians about political and social issues. You ask them, do you have problems with the Lebanese? And they're like, no, everything's fine, there are no issues here. But then the positive are that the likelihood of things leading to violence are minimal. So yes, for the social, we have, it's two completely polar opposite spectrums, and each comes with its own challenges and opportunities.
Another one of the questions touches on something else that you mentioned earlier, which is about working with other organizations. And I know you mentioned a bit about connecting with UNDP because of their connections with government. And I wonder if you could expand on any connections that Mercy Corps has made working with other organizations who are also trying to engage with municipalities. I know we've heard some examples coming in of both Oxfam and UN Habitat, trying to do this work in Lebanon as well. And I wondered, what opportunities there have been for kind of cross-sharing of ideas and planning and so on between yourself and other organizations working in Lebanon.
So this is very much what that municipality to municipality peer learning component is about, which is we're going to have the first one of those meetings in about 3 weeks. And exactly as you said, there are a few organizations using different methodologies that have a lot of similarities, bringing together, you'll be 2 or 3 of the municipality Lebanese Syrians, 2 to 3 of those actors. And that forum will be very much for the municipalities and the Lebanese and or Syrian refugee community leaders to share, okay, Mercy Corps did this, which was great. Mercy Corps didn't do this, which would have been great, and Mercy Corps did this, which wasn't great. And then talk about, the same for UNDP's approach, for International Alert's approach, for Search for Common Ground's approach, for UN Habitat's approach. So definitely, as through this program, we want to give opportunities for people to compare and contrast these methodologies and really try to come up with, okay, from all of this is probably the best approach for Lebanon. Because obviously, these mechanisms are going to be different from country to country. I already spoke a little bit about our work in Jordan and Iraq, which very much helped me to design this program, but the nuances and the details have huge impact in terms of the overall program.
And coming towards the end, I think we've got about 2 more questions, and it kind of is fitting for a question towards the end. What happens when Mercy Corps goes? Do you have an exit strategy, and particularly for working with government? Is that kind of, does that add an element in terms of when you're thinking of an exit strategy for a program that you're working with government?
Absolutely. So very much our exit strategy is, through the creation of this mechanism whereby the Lebanese Syrians and the municipalities design and implement programs. This is a mechanism that you can use for anything and everything. So we're trying to, and we've had some success in this, connect other international organizations and national organizations with projects to implement in these areas through this community leader mechanism. So whether, let's say, on the most rigid end, let's say an organization has money from ECHO to build 1,000 toilets, then they can come to this mechanism and use them to prioritize which households they should build these toilets for. Or on the opposite end of the spectrum, if you have, let's say, a 5-year livelihoods program, then once again you can use this mechanism to identify what are the needs and resources that this community has to be able to facilitate the work of these organizations. So I very much want to create this mechanism as a conduit for future humanitarian and development programming in the area. And it seems to have some success in that.
Thank you so much, Andras, for answering all of these questions and sharing so much of your experiences with us. Our final question for the day is simply if you have any kind of summary advice for organizations wanting to work with local government who perhaps haven't had the length of time that Mercy Corps has had in Lebanon to build on these relationships and so on? If organizations recognizing that there are benefits to reaching out to local governments, what advice would you give for them getting started?
Hire people from the area. Hire people who know the mayors, who are connected to them. Again, this comes back into some of the corruption and clientelism issues we said earlier. But as an international organisation, you're never going to understand local dynamics perfectly. So if you hire local people, they will be able to really put forward and portray the project in a way that the local government understands. And it builds that trust with the local government, it builds that trust with the local community, and that's what will facilitate your work. You hire somebody from another city and try to go in and implement a program with the local government, that's not going to go very successful. Hire people as locally as possible.
Wonderful. I think that's a good tip and a great end to a really insightful presentation. Thank you again so much, Andras, for joining us and sharing your thoughts and responding to all of these questions. I think it's been really valuable for those of us who were able to make it today. Once again, thanks to everyone listening for joining us today. And if you have any follow-up questions that we didn't get to, I know there are some questions we didn't get to that were submitted, or if any come to you on reflection, then please do let us know, and we'll do our best to connect you with Andras and also the wealth of experience that exists within the community of practice. So thanks again to everyone for joining us, and we look forward to seeing you next time. Bye.